So now on the line, I am joined by Robert O'Connor. Good morning, Robert. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How's it going?
Great. Good to have you on again. It's always fantastic to have you on the show. We've had a fair few of your single launches covered on the show over the years. It's always great to chat to you.
Yeah, you guys have been incredibly supportive over the years, so thanks for that.
No, absolutely. The stuff, it's brilliant to get you on and brilliant to hear these tracks. And we'd love to get as many local artists as possible to do what Robert does, get in touch with us and get those tracks over to us, send over a press release or just some information as Robert did, and we can come on and chat about the song. I actually remember, I was only talking to people today, the first time I actually met you was at our community, we did an award show.
I remember that, yeah.
This is years ago. I can't remember how, it has to be 5 years ago.
It would have been 2018, I think. That was the kind of first year I was making music again after a break. I think I did the performance at the
On Air Award.
Yeah, that's right, in the Draocht, and that was kind of the beginning of the relationship with Phoenix again. You guys got on board straight away with that first single, so I kept coming back.
And we're very, very glad you did. That was my first year with the station as well. It was my first On Air Awards that we did. So I suppose something common there. But so we're going to chat about the new track that you have coming, and so we'll get on to that in a second. But I suppose just in general, I know you've been on the station a couple of times during the pandemic, and you've been on the station since. How have you been finding it, kind of starting to get back to normal a little bit now and being able to have a bit more freedom, whether it be gigging or just getting out there in general?
Yeah, so the craziest thing for me is I actually found myself more active musically during the COVID years, which is mad, really. Wow. I think it just forced me in a different direction to go kind of, embrace the virtual side of things and to... I revisited some old tracks that I felt didn't maybe get the chance that they should have got previously years ago. And I started working with new producers abroad, and we would work online together, people who I've never actually physically met. So I kind of developed strangely richer relationships without ever meeting these producers in the UK, and as far as Peru as well. Like I ran a competition a couple of years ago, and I ended up meeting a couple of producers through that, and it just really expanded my horizons. Like I'm now on since 2018, I'm now on single 11 since 2018, and then last year, 2020, so 2 years ago, I did an EP, which I hadn't really done in quite some time. I had just been doing singles, but I kind of felt like, I suppose with the time off with COVID, not working as much, because I always have a couple of jobs on the go to that can work alongside the music stuff, and not having those allowed me to kind of focus completely on making music and on having a little look in the rear view mirror as well before kind of going forward.
Yeah. It's really incredible to see how people were so resilient during that time. You look at, obviously yourself and your own story there. It's the kind of thing where the pandemic happened, and it happened obviously in our generation, and it's because we are so connected. We were a very internet, globally connected world at the minute. It kind of pushed people to take advantage of that, I think, where they would normally have maybe stayed in their own bubble or their own kind of relatively local space. It pushed people to do what you did yourself there, and got in touch and started working with musicians from all over the world and producers from all over the world.
I think it would have been easy to sort of say, I had been gigging with a live band right up to before COVID, and I think it was disappointing to have to put a stop to that, but for me it even I was at the beginning of a change musically, moving away from the kind of more pop rock country towards the electronic stuff. And I was kind of lucky in that respect, because it was a lot more possible for me to go down the electronic route without actually playing live gigs, and to just release singles and to do, to develop relationships with playlisters and with bloggers, and to give some time to that. I think that's the problem as artists. We have so many different things going on. We don't really have the time to nurture the relationships with radio if we're self-represented, and with bloggers and all this sort of thing. So we end up kind of rushing from one release to the other and trying to build at the same time.
Yeah. So in a sense, I suppose being kind of forced to slow down a little bit kind of helped you to find new avenues and maybe be a bit more creative as well.
Definitely. I found a matter of weeks, I think it was the month after COVID, it was April, and I had released a single in the February, which kind of had been a bit of a slow burn. And then April, suddenly there was an uptick in streams, and I kind of thought, what's going on here? Because I haven't done any extra promo. It was just,
Yeah.
I think, a case of people listening to longer Spotify playlists. And if you were added to a Spotify playlist, but you were sort of buried halfway through it, people were actually at home listening to music all day in the background instead of maybe listening to the same, 5 tracks that they hear on radio every day, or commercial radio at least.
It's a really good point, actually. And I think, do you know what I'd say a big part of it was as well? I mean, in those early days of COVID, everybody, just to stay sane, was going on so many walks. And if anyone is anything like me, I cannot go for a walk without a pair of earphones in and my music.
Exactly
I
the
have to
same.
have music while I'm walking. So I'd say a lot of people were sticking on playlists and just listening to stuff that maybe, I know I did this, stuff that was in my backlog.
Yeah.
Bands and artists that I knew, like, people have been telling me, you have to listen to these, and I will. But then once you're kind of in a position where the only thing you can do to keep yourself from going mad sitting in the house all day is go for walks, and if you listen to your music while you go for walks, you start to go through that backlog. So I'd say there was probably a lot of that.
I think so, yeah.
Well.
I think it was good for the head, and it kind of allowed us to experience new things. I mean, look, it was a challenging time as well. But definitely, I think even for people who were maybe not happy with what they were doing pre-COVID, it allowed them to reflect on that and see what they can do in the future to, be more satisfied.
Yeah. So anyway, tell us about this new track, The Last Time. So what's the story with this?
Yeah, so this is a bit different. It's a bit different because it's a cover. So this is my first cover since 2018 when I did the Joni Mitchell track around Christmas, River. And this is, The Last Time. So it's originally by Agnieszka Falskog from Abba, and it was released in 87 originally. I don't think it's been widely covered. It wasn't a big hit at the time, and the idea behind it was we had been tapping into some sort of Swedish and Scandinavian sounds with the last couple of singles, myself and Gareth Shortland, my producer, and he had said to me, what about we do like a cover of, one of these acts that you love, that you're inspired by? And I said, oh God, I would never touch an ABBA song, because I just think, when you have that much respect for like a legacy artist like that, it's really difficult to be objective about it. And if it didn't turn out well, I would be horrified. So it was his idea, this track from one of the Agnieszka solo albums, and it still had that ABBA connection. And I think because the Avatar show, the ABBA Voyage show, was launching on the 27th of May, just gone in the UK, that kind of gave me the push to say, okay, actually maybe this is a good time to celebrate our love mutually for that music. And we released the single on that day, and it just felt right. Like it wasn't doing an ABBA track, but it was some ABBA adjacent, and I brought it into, originally it was a bit more of a sort of Californian pop rock vibe, kind of paraballady on the Agnieszka version. So I decided to bring it more towards what I imagine the sort of Swedish interpretation would be of that, and into my own kind of sonic palette. So it's a lot more, it has a bit of a Pet Shop Boys feel to it. There are some ABBA undertones and then some more modern influences as well. But it's definitely, it's kind of, there's a little bit of 90s, there's a little bit of everything in there. But it's kind of, it's got a lot of energy to it, I think.
That sounds really cool to me, because I was going to say, in the press release that you sent around, you used the word reimagined. So rather than, and I always find that really interesting when people talk about cover, because I think there's two ways to do a cover. You can either try to be as close as possible and as true to the original song as possible, which is always dangerous, because if you're even a little bit off, and you're always going to be scrutinized based on the original if you do it that way. And I think the other way to do it is go the complete opposite. Do it in your own style, do it in your own way, whatever suits you, and as you put it, reimagine it.
Definitely. And I think because this has to fit into a bigger picture for me, like, I mean, I'm going to announce something later in the summer, where some of these songs will come together in a form. I want it all to flow. Like, I'm a big fan of that sort of continuity. And, if you're doing a record for there to be kind of a stream that runs through that feels consistent. So that was important to me, for it to sound like in there with my own tracks, for it to be at home, not for it to sound like there's this random cover just for the sake of it. So yeah, I totally agree with doing the latter with that, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really cool because I think the kind of modern music context, I suppose, where we're sort of living in an age now where people are, releasing a track at a time, or they're releasing a couple of tracks on Spotify, and it's cool, but a lot of times there's no consistency with the stuff that artists are releasing. And it's from me, a lot of the bands that I listened to and grew up listening to, you'd listen to the album.
Definitely.
And that album had a vibe to it. You could, even if you weren't 100% sure off the top of your head what track that album came from, if you heard a couple of tracks of that album, you'd know, oh yeah, they're all from...
It's a time
blah,
and a
blah,
place. It's a time and a place, and it brings you back to that when you hear it years later, and there's a richness about that, and I think an artistry to that, whereas right now it does feel like the attention span is getting shorter and shorter of consumers, and I don't blame consumers. I do sort of blame, apps like TikTok and things like this where, look, it has to be done. We have to embrace it to a point, but we don't have to pander to every single trend that comes around and say, well, my single has to be less than 2 minutes and I have to cut out the bridge and the second chorus. It's like, as an artist, you should be allowed, certainly as an independent artist, to make choices and say, well, does this fit who I am and my kind of artistic ethos, if you want? Like, I mean, it's like you can't just pander to trends with this hope of reaching the masses, I suppose. It depends on what's important to you, but for me it's to look back in a couple of years and say, like, look at this project, for instance, coming up, or the one that I did in 2020, and say that was a fulfilled, like, realized vision, and sonically achieved what I wanted it to achieve, rather than it did X amount of numbers or got a trending video on TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. And the track has been out for a while now. It came out in May, didn't it?
That's right. It came out the 27th of May. The reason for that was a bit of a rush release. So the track was recorded in February along with a few others. And then I had a couple of other things going on behind the scenes, and I was working. And so I held off until the 27th to tie in with the Abba Voyage launch. It just felt right to do it then. And so the video is coming this week. This one's been a bit of a slow burn. So normally I kind of hit everything at once within sort of a 2-week frame, but because there was the rush to get it out on that date, we then had to sort of play catch up. So a remix came out last Friday, an 80s style remix by a guy called Sakra, who is a YouTuber, and he releases his remixes of tons of other artists on YouTube, and his whole vibe is that he does like kind of PWL, Stockegg and Waterman style remixes. So it's really, really like he references that sound, and you know who to go to if you want it. So that came out, and now the video will come out this Friday. So so this kind of reaches a peak this week.
It's and just speaking of peaks, just because you used the word peak and it's written in front of me here, so it did peak at number 2 in the LGBTQ music charts. Which is fantastic, and I believe it's your 7th top 5 placing track in that chart.
Yeah, that's been a huge thing. Like, the support from that community has been incredible. I think there's a fun factor to it, and it's quite unashamed in its sound, and the last few singles have been that way, and it's sort of, there's no pretense to it. So I think that kind of resonates with the LGBT community, and that website in particular has picked up pretty much every single actually since 2018. So yeah, there's been like, it's strange because you can kind of really push promo in certain areas and then it organically happens in other ways, and that was the case with this. But it's it's great to have listeners be engaged and be willing to vote for you and vote for your songs, and because that's how that chart works, is it's a vote system. So it's always nice when something happens without you actually going and asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm afraid the clock is against us here, so we're going to have to wrap up. If people want to listen to the track, where can people find it? I assume it's available on streaming services, anywhere you want to look for.
All the usual places: Spotify, the HQ version on Apple Music. They have that new high definition sound. And then anywhere you want to download, Amazon, Bandcamp, any of those, it's everywhere.
Brilliant. So get out and have a look for it. So we're actually going to play your track now as well. So Robert, thanks very much for joining us today. It was lovely speaking to you.
It was a pleasure.
Here is your track, The Last Time.